Today's guest is a force to be reckoned with in the event space. She has worked in a variety of production and programming roles for city-sponsored events like Perth Festival, Melbourne Festival, Darwin Festival, and more. Let's learn about how these gigs come together. Hello to you beautiful creative geniuses and welcome to this episode of Art on Fire. Thank you in particular to my new patrons. I've got up to my first 4 patrons on Patreon. This is a brand new program and I'd love to introduce you to the people who are helping get this thing started. First, there's me. My name is Joseph Andrin and I always back myself in all my projects. Back when I ran kitesurfing adventures, I was the first person to buy tickets to a 500-person movie premiere that I organized. And when organizing Blazing Swan festival fundraisers, I was the first person to buy a ticket to those 100-person festivals too. I like to show that I do actually support the work that I'm doing, so I actually always just buy tickets to my own things, even though I could technically go for free because I'm the organizer. But anyway, that's me. The second person to jump on to Patreon is Pasan Tennakoon. Pasan Tennakoon is the chairman behind Blazing Swan and he's a major force at the Liberators International. Get to know him on episode 5 of this show. It's a wicked podcast. The third person to come and join us on Patreon is my mum. Thank you, Mum, Branka Andrin. I'm always grateful when I'm doing things that my mum can see that I enjoy and she pushes me in that direction and she helps me to grow. Mum's always been a supporter of me and a fan of me. Mum, I love you lots. And finally, the fourth patron to join me is David J. Cry, who is also the guest of episode number 7. David is a hugely talented artist who is fascinated with vibration. He commits himself so fully to his projects, he always goes 10 times bigger than any mere mortal. I'd love you, and I mean you, whoever's listening, I mean you, to come join the community on Patreon. For my first 100 patrons, when you sign up, I'll get in touch with you and I'll prepare thanks on a live show just like this that you can have a recording clip of too, as a way for me to say thanks for coming on board and thanks for helping create this content. Learn a lot more about what I'm doing on that channel. Someone who really does much more than support artists is today's guest, Holly Norman, who works full-time to create festivals and events that give artists the space to shine. She is an arts manager, musician, and wellbeing advocate based in Perth. She is currently the associate producer for music with Perth Festival. Some of her career achievements have included program manager for Melbourne International Festival, contemporary music production for Melbourne Festival, now called Rising, and artist logistics for Darwin Festival, and project management of Perth International Jazz Festival. Organizing festival takes a bit of genius, and I find the best way to ignite my genius is with the Genius Ignition system. 100% of the time that you do it and listen to the show, you'll take away a fun, creative new idea, a new realization you've never had before. Let me explain how it works. It's super easy. I need you, whoever you are, wherever you are, right now to start rubbing your hands. Get those hands rubbing because it's just got a little bit warm up so that we can let this stuff soak in. And in a moment's time, I'm going to do a countdown. We're going to do a simultaneous clap. All of us. 3, 2, 1.
Touch the genius.
I've touched a genius. That's the declaration that comes after the clap. Remember it, remind yourself of that often, and now let's get on with the show.
Welcome, Holly.
That is the best intro.
Yay.
I think it's the best intro I've ever heard.
Yay.
I've just got the biggest smile now. That's
Wonderful,
so
wonderful.
funny.
Thank you. That's the energy we want to go for. That's the energy that's wanted to be created. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. I'm clearly a dag, but I got to go
Love
with
it
it
though.
sometimes.
But you're a dag that backs yourself. That's what I've learned about you in that intro.
Yeah, I can back myself into corners every now and then. I can also back myself into things that I shouldn't back myself into. But this project Feel Fun, that intro makes me laugh, and it's really lovely to see that it makes you laugh. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming down. Thank you for being part of the show.
Thanks
Episode
for
number
having
11.
me.
Thank you. You've just come directly from Whopper.
Yeah. I was just spending a bit of time out there this morning talking to some of the music students.
Yep.
They do a music business unit within the music course now, which they never did when I was there. Well, they did it badly. So I think they're lifting that kind of side of things now, which is great. So I was just doing a little guest chat with them.
Yeah, cool. And for anyone who's listening from not Western Australia, WAPA stands for Western Australian...
It's WA Academy of Performing Arts. It used to be called the Conservatorium of WA. So It's kind of, I guess if you put it on like a national counterpart level, it'd be like the VCA of Western Australia or like the NIDA. So it's got different streams of arts disciplines, dance, theatre, music, all rolled into one.
And so they have a unit there on business?
Yeah, specifically music business. And they combine the students from all of the different music streams. So they've got classical music, contemporary music and jazz all sitting in one room hoping to make a living from the music biz in the future.
And were you there providing them some education, some content?
Yeah. Like I used to guest lecture when I lived in Melbourne. I was lecturing for Monash University over there. So I've done that.
Give us a hot tip. Give the musicians listening a hot tip. Like where does the money actually come from? How do they actually make it?
It's like a little bit more of a roundabout tip, but the probably the biggest tip that I would always give people is that you're actually working in the service industry. So all of your skills across many, many different, career paths, not just music, but specifically music. It's about being able to communicate with people. So if you can't pick up the phone and call somebody, you're going to really struggle. It's a lost art, picking up the phone.
And calling someone.
And having a conversation. Like it's people skills, and I waitressed for years and worked in hospitality for years. None of that time was ever wasted. Conflict resolution, negotiation, dealing with a late dish coming out of the kitchen. That's formed a big part of my work today.
And so when you mean by picking up the phone, it's just like for the hustle, for them to get gigs or to get sponsors or to get money or to get...
Yeah, it's like that first step, of kind of putting yourself out there because, you're going to struggle if you're not able to put yourself out there, I think, in almost every profession now, right? Not just music, but it's a cutthroat world out there. Just to get a job is, there's 50,000 versions of each profession. So I think it's being able to form that elevator pitch and let people know in a way that's succinct but captures their attention. What is it that sets you apart from other people that do the same thing that you do?
So am I... The thought that's just come into my head is just like, all right, if I was to be a rock star, many rock stars are doing it for the fans.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they will work with a venue or work with a label or work with something else in order to monetize it, because it's difficult to go straight to your fans, especially if I don't know how you do it. So the idea of picking up the phone is then, you've already got fans who love your music, but now you need to be able to call a venue and be like, look, I'm going to bring the fans, or I'm going to be good for you, or somehow convince someone who's got access to a platform for you to be on it. Is that?
Yeah, I think it really depends. If you're talking about being a rock star, like I'm pretty sure Mick Jagger doesn't pick up the phone for really anybody. He's got people to pick up the phone for him. Like once you reach a certain point, obviously you can employ phone picker-uppers. But at like a grassroots level at the beginning of your career, it's the hustle is a word that my relationship with continues to evolve.
Yeah.
My Instagram bio used to be full-time side hustler because I joke that I have like so many side hustles all rolled together, and that's basically become my life's work. It's just the collection of hustles.
I've had some very good experiences hustling, and I actually really enjoy it when I'm working in a project that I really like, and I understand what it's about. I'm good on the phone. When I'm doing something I'm on fire for, then I can just start hustling and start calling. I've managed to put together some really cool events because of the hustle. I never really thought about how much it was that skill of getting on the phone and putting myself out there on that opened the door, but it really did.
Totally.
I was calling old businesses and associations and organizations of all sorts that I never knew. And
it's effectively just the ability to make things happen. Like you're creating something out of nothing where there wasn't a link or a connection, then you're making one.
I'd like to get some advice on behalf of a friend.
Yeah. It's going to become an agony aunt segment.
This is a fun one. My friend's name is Jamie McMillan. She is a phenomenal artist. She's really great, and she has recently decided that she's going to make it as an artist. So she's committed. She's done her craft and she's committed. She's also a really good actor, and she's also really good at character play. And she's invented a character, which is probably best to actually just describe as a different person. Jamie knows someone called Butsy, and Butsy is representing Jamie as her manager. And Butsy's like a really crass New York type. And when I met Butsy, I was like, oh, she's amazing. You could put Butsy on the phone and Butsy would be able to convince everyone. Just the curiosity alone would have to get people, right? Like it's so wild and original. What is it that when Butsy calls venues looking for the perfect stage for Jamie, that a venue cares about? What cares about most that they want to hear when they're trying to choose who they let their stage to?
I'm going to be 100% honest with you and tell you that the thing that they care the most about is whether or not an artist has marketability and whether or not they can put butts on seats.
Butts on seats. Butsy. Oh my God.
Butsy, get it?
All right, cool. Jamie Mack, you heard it. Cool. That's a cool one there. All right. So, so you're an event organizer. You've been organizing all kinds of events and festivals around Australia. You've just moved back from Melbourne, but you were from Perth originally, correct?
That's right, yeah.
And now you're back here in Perth. Can you tell us a fun story? Do you have any, what's the most chaotic event you've ever worked on?
I can tell you the story of, well, it's not the worst. There are lots of things that happen in, the life trajectory of an event that can make it be challenging, but this is an anecdote that I often actually tell this in job interviews, and I normally get hired, so it must demonstrate something about me. Maybe it's just my sense of humor.
Yep.
No, I used to work for an event business that's based in Perth actually, and I won't name them, but it's really where I cut my teeth as an event manager. I only worked there for 2.5 years, so not a long time, but I sort of went from being like basically a glorified intern when I started to, having a lot more confidence when I finished and kind of had my own client portfolio, and it was great. That it was a job that really, really grew me. But one of the experiences that I had working there, the woman that ran the business, she decided to put on a gigantic slip and slide running down St. George's Terrace, so down the heart of the city. Mm-hmm. We were going to do road closures. It was going to be 300 meters long. I
remember it.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Yeah.
So when you do a road closure, A, it's extremely costly. B, it takes a long time to do a road closure because, the kind of traffic people have to get up in the wee hours of the morning, start blocking off all the roads, diverting all of the traffic. Mm-hmm. So it's obviously it was a huge project. The actual slide itself I think it was made of this type of rubber that was imported from China, and it had to be assembled and built, and there was water pumps, and we were going to run water down it. Anyway, me and my really I'm a music, arts manager. That's what I do. This type of event wasn't really within my skill set, but I was kind of pulled along for the ride and, working for this agency. And we promoted the absolute shit out of it. So I think the max capacity of the event was 17,000 people, and 17,000 people turned up on the dinger. As we opened the gates, they were all standing there in the baking hot sun. Mm-hmm. People in Perth do not like to stand in queues, right? They don't have the psychology for it.
No one likes to stand in queues.
Yeah, but I think that they're particularly impatient with it. Anyways, they were standing there, and the worst thing that could have happened as we opened the event happened, which is the water pump broke immediately, almost as soon as we opened the gate. So, you can't send somebody down a water slide without any water. So we had all of these very distressed patrons standing around. I was walking up and down the street, trying to look like I was being useful. There was obviously nothing that I could do. We were trying to gaffer tape the pump closed so that the water could run through it. It was ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And it got to, I think we fixed it, resolved some of the issues. But people were basically just taking bites out of us all day because there was so many unhappy customers.
Was it free?
It was not free. It was ticketed.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was ticketed. It had a cloakroom. It was a kind of a micro festival, but it was this slip and slide. Anyway, night fell. As part of our safety, our water safety regulation, we'd had to get all of these rubber rings, the tubes that you put around your waist when you're a kid and you go out into the water. So we had like thousands of them that had all been inflated. I remember they were being inflated in the morning. We'd roped.
Wait. You had rubber tubes.
Yes.
Is that to prevent people from drowning?
That's right.
Wasn't it a slip and slide that was only like 1 inch
But at the
deep?
end, they go into like a little mini bath at the end. You know, at the end, all the water pools at the end.
And what? So the safety regulation that you guys went down said you had to get thousands of these tubes.
That's correct.
What, for every person to, what, do they have to wear them down the slides?
No, they didn't have to wear them, but
They just had to be there.
I don't even remember. I don't remember. It was just one of those
the
like
world of safety,
it was one of those box ticking
Yeah.
things that just had to be done. So we had all of these like functionless rubber tubes that had been inflated, and come the end of the day, like night had fallen, we were all just like lobster color of sunburn. We'd been out in the sun all day. Like we were a really small team. We were dehydrated, and my boss then at the time, who was running this event, said, "Okay, we need to start de-inflating all of these rubber rings." You know, and I was like, are you serious? Like, that's going to take hours. The roads will be open again by then. You know, can't we just get a Stanley knife and start slashing through them? She said, no, because we've spent too much money on them. And yeah, I basically at that moment just like took stock of the situation. And I thought, you know what? I have a music degree. Like, what am I doing here? And I said to her, I'm not staying for the bump out. Like, I'm going to see you later. And she was like, if you walk away, like you're going to get fired. And I was like, I accept that consequence. This is actually ridiculous at this point. Like this is a disaster. And I'm so sunburned. Anyway, I went home and just like slept it off. Like I think I'd walked like 28 kilometers or something that day. Like you walk a lot when you're doing an event. It's just really physically taxing. And anyway, I got up the next morning thinking, okay, I'm jobless now because I walked off that site. And she rang me and said, you know what, I really respect the way that you stood up to me and I want to like offer you basically more responsibility.
Props.
So instead of losing the work that I had, it turned out okay.
Yeah,
but
cool.
It was
Props.
it was a nice feeling to stand my ground, I guess.
Yep. I can see why that's a good interview response. Anyone who's preparing for a job interview, this is the kind of scenario that you want to dig through your memory banks for. We've all done it. Dig through your memory banks, find this story, have it prepared, polish it. That was really well told. That's great. I particularly like the world does crazy things in every industry, in every space, and the safety thing can go nuts. We're living in the times of COVID. I was traveling as a performance artist last year, and I wound up at Adelaide Fringe, and I was also at Perth Fringe, so two large performance arts festivals. And it was just so funny to see the different ways that the different states were managing COVID, because it's literally not about logic. There is none there.
It's actually just about politics and optics.
Yeah, politics.
It's
politics
arbitrary
and optics.
measures that it's at a certain point. We've just got to keep pushing this can down the street now,
and it's awful.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And so because it's a result of politics and optics, not logic, it manifests in different ways in different cities. Because in this city, this person was winning the competition of getting the most attention about being COVID righteous. In another city, it was someone else. And so their expressions would come out differently. So in Adelaide, for example, the artists were treated as if they were like totally viral at all times. And so if an artist was to have an interactive piece, anything that they touched before it went to the audience could all sit next to each other as if they were fine. The audience could all sit there unmasked next to each other, totally cool. But if the artist happened to touch anything at all,
you have to disinfect it.
And it had to be Glen 20. And the Glen 20 is a brand of disinfectant product, for anyone who doesn't know it. It's a spray product, and it was in the safety sheets. It's just so ridiculous that in the safety sheet it would say Mask Glen 20, the product, before handing it on. And just watching that charade was, oh God, it's so tiring. It's a tough one. I take it sometimes too personally, and I kind of have to just like tune out to those things in the end, because if I look at the logical inconsistencies, I just want to scream at people.
Yeah, it's infuriating. I totally understand. And most of my work over the last 2 years, I've done, what are we now? April? Is it April?
Yes.
2022.
Yep.
So I did 3/4 of the pandemic until 6 months ago. I did in Melbourne, which is totally different kettle of fish to being here. And so all of my work was, just cancelling back-to-back events, basically living in in a hermit lifestyle for that whole time. And yeah, at times I was really tearing my hair out with how arbitrary some of the measures felt. Not just in a performance capacity, just in a lifestyle capacity. Like, so I'm allowed to go 5 kilometers from home, but 6 kilometers, which happens to be where the beach is not permitted.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just not going to see the beach for 3.5 months. Yeah, it's crazy. My partner was much better at just taking it on the chin than I was. I tend to have a very anti-establishment streak that runs deep within my blood, and it does come to the forefront at times. So I've had to kind of temper that in order to be able to continue working in creative industries, I think, during this time when things have become so mandated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like a bit of anti-establishment, but I also am hearing, just based on your intro story, that you will stand up for yourself as well. Yeah. So that's not anti-establishment. It's just don't push me around. Don't do something completely ridiculous.
I just think a bit of boundaries don't go astray. In every arena of life. And again, it's something that it's difficult because, having taken a tertiary stream into working in the arts, I came in as a musician. We were effectively told, and it's modeled to you as a young artist and as a young person in the industry, you've got to do all of this unpaid work for exposure, and you have to work these long hours, and you've got to put your nose to the grindstone, which, like we were saying before, that's the hustle culture, and there are really positive outcomes from that. But I think you got to kind of dance between the two, because too much of that first column is difficult.
I want to get back to that dance in a moment, because I think there'll be some really fun things to talk about that people listening can learn, I can learn. But we also just made reference to the date, and today is April 19 of 2022. In 1 year and 1 day, it'll be April 20 of 2023, which is when we're going to have a total eclipse in Exmouth. And so it's quite likely that lots of people are going to go to Exmouth. You listening, go. It's going to be great. Lots of people are going to go, but there's currently no festival or events there. I'm curious, first, what your thoughts are on what an eclipse event means to you, if that means anything to you. I can share some of the things that it means to me in a second, if that helps. But yeah, what the eclipse event might mean to you, and what you think would be a really great way for this state and the people of Exmouth and the local traditional owners of that area to put on a something that enables other people, as they come, when they will, to really enjoy that truly rare natural phenomena together.
Yeah. So just to rewind and to make me sound like a total dummy, because I wasn't great at science at school.
Yeah.
And my partner's a total science head, so he'll hate that I'm asking this. But the eclipse is when the moon passes in front of the sun.
Yes,
is that correct?
Right. And so there's different types of eclipses. Now, this is not a dummy question at all, because there's also the lunar eclipse, which happens pretty often.
Yeah.
This is a solar eclipse, and the solar eclipse is when the moon passes in front of the sun, and it does it in different ways at different times, but. Skipping all of that, the way that this one will be that the moon will so completely cover the sun that the stars will come out, and so it'll be
during the day.
Okay. So it'll be 11:52, I think, just before lunch, 11:52 in the morning, and then the moon will slowly make its way across the face of the sun, and then it'll so completely block out the sun that it'll become pitch black, and then the moon will come away from the sun again. You'll get pitch black for about 62 seconds, so it's not a long period of time that's pitch black, and so you will have a weird rapid twilight on either side of it, and it only happens in a very small area of the earth called the line of totality, where you have just the pitch black, and the pitch black happens to just scrape the whole of the Exmouth Peninsula, which is not a large area of land, but that line of totality it's about 70 kilometers or 35 miles wide, where you can be like standing in that width, and if you're standing in that width of that area, then you will get to that total pitch black experience. People outside of there will see partial eclipses, but that's why people travel for the eclipse. It's kind of like the energy of like an Olympics, or like the soccer finals, the FIFA finals or whatever. It's got that same kind of energy, because it happens like randomly in a different city, but it's not organized by politics. It's organized by movements of the planets. And yeah, so that's a little bit about eclipses.
That sounds so cool. So my first thought actually when you said that is, if it's only going to last for 60 seconds, like just for me personally, what I would want to take place during that time is nothing except that event. Like
absolutely.
Do something else around the periphery of what's going to happen.
Yeah,
Absolutely. You can build, a festival or some kind of installation around that concept and around that event. But I think just like let everything be sucked into the orbit of whatever's happening outside of Earth, because that is way cooler than anything you can make, right? That's
sure.
Cooler than any kind of soundtrack, anything that is responsive to that is actually just like witnessing the raw power of that happening.
Absolutely. I'm glad we're in alignment there. But so the question I guess is more like, in your experience of having run like large city festivals or having participation in those large festivals, how would you begin this? I know I'm currently digging around, trying to make contacts, trying to understand like how this will happen. I'm interested in documenting the whole process and getting to know all the players who are going to do anything about it, and then maybe having them on the show and literally tell the whole story. But if you were to be responsible for organizing an Eclipse event, how would you work out how to design what a cool event looks like, and what would you go from there? Who would you get in contact with? Where would the money come from? How would you get out to the people? Who would the people be? Whatever, any area that you feel excited to talk about.
It's like, obviously it's a very complex equation of a lot of those things, taking place together. I'm a real pragmatist, so I usually tend to start with the dollars and cents. I was raised by a small business owner. My dad is a tradie. So that's kind of, it's really influenced I think event psychology is the compulsion to get things to break even, which if, people don't know what that means, it basically means that whatever you spend, you get back. So you don't have to make money, because God knows you rarely will. But, if you do, awesome. But in the space that I work in, where a lot of our projects are federally or state funded or grant funded or come from philanthropy, you basically end up with this kind of pie of lots of different pieces of income that come from different sources. And usually one of the smallest slivers of the pie is actual event ticket revenue. So if you're going to ticket, an Eclipse event, that will usually end up being the most marginal piece of your income. Obviously you have to do a lot of scoping, I think, if you're going to put an event together from scratch, like a huge amount of scoping. It's consultation with the local community. What kind of appetite is there for an event to take place in that region for the locals as a first point of call? What kind of appetite is there, for people to travel from, the next biggest city centre, which would be Perth. Is it going to become an intrastate tourism piece? Does it have attraction from that point of view? So I think it's kind of really scoping, like, who is the audience of this thing? How big do we want to go? How many people do we want to attract? And then you can, from that point, budget it. Because if you know how many people, what level of activity you're doing or activation you're doing, like a one-day event is obviously extremely different to a 3-day event. A daytime event is very different to a nighttime event. They all have different kind of, price tags attached to them depending on what kind of activity or what sort of offerings you want to put up. So it's quite complex, really.
Teach me more about the pie. So if the pie chart. So if a very small slither or a very small slice of the pie is made up of revenue that comes directly from people who buy tickets, what are some of the much bigger slithers?
Yeah, so
big slices of pie.
There's like the government, I suppose. Although it's hard to get funding from the government for a startup event, but you can get one-off grants. So, for example, the department here, which has changed its name since I used to live here, it used to be called DCA. I think now it's called Department of Local Government, Sports and Cultural Industry, something like that. There's an acronym that I can't recall. But they offer, basically just different grant categories. So that's at a state level. There's also at a federal level, so a lot of arts funding runs through the Australia Council as kind of the federal, hander-outerer of Scott Morrison's cash. And then there's private philanthropy. There's contra contributions. So if you've got an AV provider in Exmouth who love the idea and they want to get on board and give you, you know, $5,000 worth of product, staging, PA in exchange for 100 tickets. That's considered, you know, from a budget point of view to be income, even though it's not physical cash in your pocket.
Yep.
So yeah, lots of different pieces of the pie.
Yep. Yeah, cool. Who are the philanthropists that put together events and how do you sniff them out?
That's such a good question. Basically, people in the high income bracket who have an interest in contributing to cultural events.
Where do we find them?
Where do you find them? So
where do we find deep-pocketed philanthropists?
I think so. I guess I'm coming at this from a blue chip arts organization model. So I can't really speak to how you would accomplish this as an indie or as a freelancer, although there certainly would be ways. But you know, incidentally, if you look for a job as in arts management in Australia, the job you can always find, and it's because it's such a difficult job to do. The job that will always be advertised and that you will never, ever, ever be out of work is in sponsorship and philanthropy. So it basically means that you have a gift for cultivating relationships, maintaining those relationships and getting money out of people.
Yep.
And that's why those roles are of huge value to organizations.
Yep.
It's not a role that I've ever worked in.
What's the main reason that a philanthropist or a sponsor throws money at an event? You know, I guess the last Fringe Festival in Perth I think it was sponsored by Woodside.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's Woodside want?
What do they
want?
want?
Why are they doing this? Like, are they giving tickets to their staff to just want to look cool in the eyes of the city? They want their share price to go up. Like,
I think, you know, the kind of global economy has really shifted in the last 20 odd years. That large organizations, they're basically seen to be not doing their due diligence if they're not doing some kind of outreach in some way, and that can be in many different ways. You know, so Bank West, for example, might sponsor a kids' little league project. So I think the psychology behind it, you know, why it's happened is because in Australia we effectively have an economy where the rich just get really, really rich and stay rich, and everybody else doesn't. And I think big business is being held to account for how they give back to the community. And it's often the optics of things like that. I think that is one factor. And then how it happens on a practical level is usually somebody within a large organization has like a personal relationship or a personal interest in arts and culture. So this is how you get the inroad to get the money in the first place. You know, maybe there's a minister who's particularly loves the theatre or loves opera, you know, and that's your moment while that person is aligned with that organization. So yeah, it's kind of almost feels like divine timing, I think, a little bit in terms of starting to get a relationship. But there's also a massive project of putting in, you know, lengthy proposals and, you know, everyone's governed by boards. You take things to boards, they sign off, people offer and equip money in, you know, very long form time frames. So yeah, it's quite a complex puzzle.
All right, on a less big end one, where we're talking about events being organised and needing to go to philanthropists for cash. How would you teach? So I've got a few friends who are sculptors. Minia, who's going to be a guest on the show, and David J. Cry, who is already a guest on the show, who are producing just ridiculously cool sculptures, and just some of the coolest things I've seen. And they share it in some ways. I'm wondering, as Minia in particular has a real intention of like having her sculpture go on a tour of festivals around the country and the world eventually. She's created one particular piece that she really wants to see travel everywhere. How does she do that?
Well, I would say, I think one thing I often kind of suggest is look for people that are doing a like thing that you want to do. So I think there's
like the Giants that came to the Perth Festival.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean that's a very large scale example.
Big one, but might as well pick a big one.
Totally.
Yeah. The Giants, just in case anyone doesn't know, is a exhibition by some European guy. I think
it was before I worked with them. Yeah, I actually don't know too much about it.
The Giants were these large giant characters that were like
basically huge puppets.
Yeah, huge puppets. What are those dolls on strings called? You know, those dolls that you can make them dance because they're held up, suspended by strings. The Giants were just massive versions of that just marched down a street, and people had to do acrobatics in order to make those things move around. Worth checking out. I'll put a image of them in the show notes, artonfirepodcast.com for the images of that. But yeah, so we pick someone who's done something like that, and then we try and copy them.
Well, not so much trying to copy them, but like unpick as like a kind of personal research project, unpick how they did that. You know, who were the sponsors? Where did they go? What was their touring route? You know, because I think you can learn a lot of valuable information by considering what pathways already exist, particularly if you want to tour. And in terms of festivals, where a lot of my work is in that space, you know, and it has been before I was, you know, working as a producer with festivals. It was as a musician wanting to get booked to play festivals and wanting to go on tour and do festivals as gigs. It's kind of looking at the life cycle and the ecology of what festivals are there who would be programming the type of work that you create. Like, where is there, you know, kind of an inroad to start to pitch?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Do some research. Find out where the festivals are. Maybe look at copying someone else, not copying, modeling off someone else, and then get on the phone, start making those phone calls.
I think so. And I mean, this is what I was saying to these students this morning. Like, you know, we're lucky in a way in that now there are so many different ways to keep track of, you know, individuals and organizations, and to follow people throughout their careers, and to really stay on top of what everybody's doing. Like, we're able to have so much currency in the kind of current climate because of social media and that sort of thing. It also means that there's a lot of noise, and it's really easy to get lost. So I think for people that are, you know, newcomers and trying to establish themselves in creative industries, it can be really intimidating to know, like, well, how do you get started? Like, how do you get that kind of visibility? And I think, you know, there's kind of a rough blueprint of things that will help anybody, which is get funding, get aligned with some sort of major platform, be it a festival, be it, you know, a major venue, showcase, something like that. Like, you know, keep a really, really diligent record of everything that you do. That's another thing that I always suggest to people. Document your work really, really thoroughly, which is difficult because sometimes that, you know, that's not cost neutral. Like, that's expensive, you know, to photograph everything that you do. If it's exhibits, to record everything that you do. If it's music, there's obviously still a cost attached to it. But I think it's incredibly important because when you put your work up to somebody, or when you pitch, or when you put yourself out there for an opportunity, like we were talking about picking up the phone, people will not, or at least I don't, people who are considering your work for opportunities, they won't just look at what you send them. You know, if an artist sends me information and they send me 3 links, I scour the internet for everything they've ever done. Mm-hmm. So I think it's, you know, there's got to be like a kind of supporting portfolio that exists somewhere that you can just build as you go. So I think that's definitely helpful as well.
Yep. As a content creator, I got to admit that in every project that I've ever done, I've always felt some level of insecurity about sharing my work when the number of likes I have is still very small and my followers is very small, and every project that's been an irritating thing to have to deal with. Things do grow naturally in time.
They do,
which is nice. And things grow so long as you keep putting that energy in. But that has been an obstacle. What would you say to an artist who's thinking about that as being like, oh, I don't even want to share it. It's going to make me look worse. That they're going to see that I only have 11 friends.
I understand. I guess it first of all, it really depends on what genre you're creating in. You know, like, I guess for like I'm using the air quotations, but like for an influencer, you can't really be considered to be an influencer if you don't have a huge amount of reach.
Yep.
So
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, we're not trying to be influencers.
there you go.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah,
that's the
gotcha.
thing. Like, but you're not trying to be an influencer.
No.
Just get the actual content itself will speak for itself, right? Like
Yep.
something that's made with high value, something that's made with authenticity. Just I would just say just focus on the product and make that kind of a direct line to whatever story you are trying to tell. And people will either resonate with it or they won't. But yeah, it's such a base analogy, but I watched MasterChef last night, which I absolutely live for MasterChef. Like, I love it. I'm like a vegetarian that just like pervs on meat being cooked. I'm such a weirdo.
Yeah.
But
whatever vice works. Yeah, anyway, keep going.
But they were talking, that somebody brought this dish and the judges were like, don't cook what you think we want to see. Just cook what comes from the heart. Like, it's so cliche, but it's actually so true, like it's not possible to create something for what you think a consumer will want. That's what's so difficult about creating work and being an artist. That's why you have to be able to endure so many knockbacks and rejections, because effectively it's just like your whole career is just this long form trial and error process of like, did that, felt it really represented me, nobody dug it, okay, tweaked that, did that, told it in a different way, maybe some people dug it. And I guess like, again, it probably comes back to that argument of why make something. I'm a very, very backwards artist because I've never made stuff for other people. Like I'd be just as happy writing songs at home in my pajamas. It's probably why I wouldn't ever be seen to be a successful artist, because I don't have any real reach.
I've just been at it's Tuesday, the weekend, the day after the long Easter celebration, and I've just been away for 4 days at Ryan Alexander's 40th birthday party, and there was an absolute gaggle of DJs there. So many of them. And most of the DJs were just DJing behind the decks and just having such a fat time, regardless of whether anyone was in the room dancing.
There you go.
Or not. Like, it was so cool to see.
That is so excellent, because how nerve-wracking would it be otherwise to be a DJ and be like, oh my God, the floor's empty, I must be shit.
Yeah. Or at least that's how I perceived it. I don't know. They might have been feeling shit. They might not have. Couldn't tell. It looked like they were having a fat time up there. It looked like they were having a lot of fun on the decks, and they were just performing as if they were just practicing in their rooms, right? Just jamming away.
Totally. And I mean, this is why we'll probably never solve this problem in in the arts, because there's the whole argument of like you do it for the love, which I think is so problematic on so many levels, and I have a lot of issues with it. But at some point, that's kind of a core truth as well. Like you do have to do it for the love. You also should eventually make money from it. In a perfect world, it's just very, very difficult to get those things to kind of organically coexist.
Have you read The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield?
I have not.
Great book. It's a little one. I actually listened to it in an audiobook, and it was great. It talks about this debacle. It talks about it quite nicely, about how to like cross this bridge. And it's like, well, you got to be a professional at some point as well. You just got to do the work. You just got to keep putting the content out there and doing the work, and just get beat up.
Yeah.
And do some more of it and get beat up again.
It's hard though. Like it's a really, really brutal industry. I did, like, I'm a yoga teacher as well, and I've done a number of yoga teacher trainings, and that's, for most of the other people that I was on those intensive trainings with, people were dropping like flies, like just having nervous breakdowns left, right and center, because that's what you do when you go away to become a yoga teacher, is you just like, you stare deeply into the mirror of your own soul until, you feel temporarily really shit about yourself. And just like, it brings up all of your inner work that you have to do. And I was like as solid as a rock. And I remember other students would turn around and say to me, how come you're not falling apart? Does this not get to you? And I was like, oh, I've done a music degree.
I've tried to perform on stage.
I've done this, like I did the getting an arguably pointless tertiary degree in like playing the triangle, basically. Because I've played percussion, like that is quite literally, some part of what it was. And then the 5 years that follows your tertiary study is like, that's really, really difficult time, because you've got to come to terms with the fact that you've just invested time and energy into, this thing that's really, really, it's not going to pay immediate dividends. It may not ever pay dividends. Like it's a very murky industry to try to wade into. Yeah.
I've got a bit of fear of bombing in when I perform. That said, I'm quite blessed to have been part of a performance group called the Hairy Godmothers. Shout out to the crew, where we just wrote a fucking hit. We just straight off the bat wrote a hit, and it was just so wonderful to be able to just always put on a hit every single time. You go out there, you just put on a hit and another hit and another hit, and they've now written another really great hit as the girls in the group have put together a special show. So that's really cool. I have put myself out there a couple of times in things where I liked my piece so much I didn't really mind if it would bomb. I've observed there's maybe a little bit of healthy narcissism there, in a point where I won't take it too personally because I liked the thing. Sometimes it feels like it misses out a little bit on the feedback, because if I'm going out there essentially and just being tone deaf to how the people are responding, then that could maybe not be a really good way to improve as an artist. But that thick skinness, or more in love with the piece that I did anyway, just because I thought it was hilarious and I wanted to share it, or I thought it was great and I wanted to share it. That really gave me the thick skin that I needed, and enough, I think, that I could actually then listen as well. I could be thick-skinned enough to do my bit really well, and open enough, because I love the bit, that I'd be open enough to be like, tell me how to make it better. Like I'm actually open for that feedback.
It's like when you actually break it down, it's a ludicrous gamble, really, the whole process. One person standing in front of an audience is so unbelievably terrifying that I can't, you almost can't believe that anybody does it at all. And yet we all do it, it's because you're going to produce something as the creator that has meaning to you. And then you place it in the hands of actual strangers to interpret it however they will, knowing that it may never be interpreted the way that it was intended, and that just allowing people to form their own conclusions and derive their own meaning from it. Like it's kind of insane that you would entrust something so personal, to others. That's why it's such an intimate thing to do.
Yeah, I like this idea of deriving meaning, and people derive their own meanings. And I had a thing that I wanted to do at the West Australian Burning Man Blazing Swan this year, and I don't really know what it means and why I wanted to do it. The festival was cancelled because of COVID, and it was a COVID piece. We've already talked a little bit about COVID. I wanted to walk around the festival one day with a entirely covered in face masks, make myself a suit that's entirely made out of face masks that covers all of my body, covers everything on me, like a face mask suit that covers everything except for my junk and my mouth, right, and my eyes. So just like this weird, fucked up human, like this inappropriate human. And so just to wear that around for half the day, and then for the other half the day to wear the exact polar opposite, to just make myself a G-banger out of masks and a face mask, and that's the only thing that I wear. I don't actually know what it means. I just feel like if I was to do both pieces in a day, and even if someone just saw one, to get like they'd make all this kind of meaning about it. I don't know what it means, but they'd make all this meaning about it, and then if they saw both, they'd make even more layers of different meaning about it. And it's the meaning making machine isn't the human. I'm just kind of doing something that amused me, that I could do as well, that like is within my ability to do. It's that thick skinned narcissist there again, but also just something that amuses me, that'd be funny, but I don't want to. It's meaningless.
Well, I mean, it's probably got meaning to somebody. That's the thing.
It'll have heaps of meaning. Yeah.
This is what's like, I cringe sometimes, now as a programmer, because part of my job is to take all of these things that people send, towards me or towards us as a programming body who are looking for performance opportunities in a festival, and to judge them against one another. That's part of my job. It's basically saying, this has value to be programmed and given offer to an audience, but this does not, like to hold two things alongside one another. That's difficult because all of them are somebody's baby in a way, like all of them are somebody's sort of inner world. You know, for me, it's still, it doesn't quite sit comfortably feeling like.
Yeah. So leaning into that, the ones that you don't choose, are you just not choosing them because they don't fit that event or festival as well as it would somewhere else? It's not even to say that it's not good. It's just like,
no,
it's
totally.
not for us.
There's a lot of different considerations. Sometimes it is because it's perceived to be not that it's not good, but it's not at a level that's going to kind of hit, I suppose. And a lot of projects sometimes are put up for opportunities in their infancy and maybe a little bit prematurely. You know, so something is maybe a little bit undercooked and needs more time for a concept to really solidify and to develop. And again, really, you're still talking about this is in the eyes and the opinions of just a bunch of people. Like, we're just people, like all other people. But like I said before, the marketability is always a concern, or it's always a consideration.
Yep.
Sometimes it is more than other times, and there's a lot of factors. I think that program diversity is a huge factor now as well, and trying to elevate artists that haven't traditionally had as much representation. It's definitely something that I'm mindful of and that I know most programmers are mindful of now.
It's something that just before the show began, we were just warming up for using microphones and practicing talking to these things. And you mentioned that it's something that you actually do want to do more of. You kind of want to support artists and help artists move into spaces where they can get paid a little bit more. And it's something that I'd actually love to be able to do as well. What's your next steps in that? So you're already doing that a lot. That's what you do at every festival.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, where do you want to go in that? How do you want to proceed in that direction?
Look, I guess like at the moment, it's, you know, I've just moved back here as well. So when
build a network again.
Yeah, I think just reestablish a network and identify where is the best place for me to apply my energy in that process. That's kind of where I'm at the moment. There are, you know, definite things that I would like to be able to support the community here with more, but I think I'm kind of just coasting as well a little bit because I'm so sick of COVID that, you know, part of leaving Melbourne, you know, if I'm being 100% transparent for me, was that I didn't feel like I had the emotional energy at the time to stick around and be part of the cleanup crew for that place, you know, seeing how badly it had been impacted by so many lockdowns, and it was just a really difficult time for the creative community over there. And I think, you know, probably like almost everybody else that lived particularly in Melbourne, but definitely, you know, more of the East Coast during that time, I think I'm probably still carrying a little bit of trauma from that as well, that I think I just want to like see the lay of the land in another 12 months or so, and then kind of work out how to move forward from there, because we're never going back, right? Like we're never going back to how things were before.
Yep, I say this
and
a lot.
so I think this is I don't see very much, strangely, I don't see very much discourse on how we're going to move forward, like very much kind of acknowledgement on what I feel is the huge elephant in the room of this massive societal change that we are amidst and that we're experiencing. That's going to change our economy. It's going to change the way that we operate socially. It's going to change audience and consumer behavior forever, like it already has. So, I guess.
Do you want to talk about that?
Well, we can talk about it if you want. I don't know I don't know the answers.
I don't know the answers either, but I totally resonated with the what you just said, is that you don't see a lot of discourse anywhere about us going forward.
Totally.
And I genuinely feel that way as well. And I've been saying it a lot to people. I'm like, guys, it's never going back to how it was.
I
right?
know.
Like these things are here to stay. There's a part of me that's open to believing that we are wearing masks for the rest of my life. Like, and maybe not everyone at all times, but there's a part of me that can see a future where a portion of humans are always wearing masks when I'm on the street forever onwards. In WA, we're extremely cooperative. We all come together, but it also means that we don't ask questions, and so we do as we're told. And so, WA is a state that has quite high levels of freedom in some ways, where we collectively choose not to exercise our individual freedoms for the greater good, but it almost seems like we are unknowingly choosing a world where forever onwards everyone's just going to wear masks everywhere, and forever onwards you're not going to be able to get any normal job unless you subscribe to the next vaccine, and we're going to have extremely exclusive principles. It's so tribal to the point where you are either part of the tribe or you are completely cut out of the tribe. You're cut out of being able to work in the tribe. You're cut out of being able to go to anywhere where the tribe goes. You're cut out from socializing with the tribe. Your voice is completely removed, which is that part's really creepy. But what are some of the things that you see going forward?
Look, I guess in the short term, I think, at least in Australia, and again, this is me with my like pragmatist, slightly doomsday hat on.
Yep.
Think we're going to have a little micro recession. We're obviously right now we have lots of inflation, so that's definitely impacting my life. I don't know if it's impacting your life, but shit is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a really interesting place, like not just in Australia, but globally as well. But we've got an election this year. Again, that impacts. It impacts everyone. But I often feel like my job at this point is like 50-50 music and politics, because policy informs everything that we get to do. It has a massive influence. So I think we're at a real tipping point, and again, I don't want to be negative, but I feel unfortunately that the behaviour of a lot of Australians and of consumers and of voters is generally to swallow the political narrative, and that is kind of this behaviour will keep you safe. Let's do what's set out for you. We don't really have a culture of insurgency. We don't really have a culture of asking questions. We're very, very compliant. Very compliant. I don't mind going along with some of this stuff. But yeah, I do think we've reached the point where you kind of have to scratch your head a little bit about all of it. I mean, there's, when I say we're not going back, like that's for so many reasons. I'm not just talking about COVID. I'm not just talking about, sort of social psychology. I'm also talking about climate. Like there's massive, massive things on the table that these are all part of what we're going to have to live with. Our generation, our children's generation. I've got a 2-year-old. It's a hectic time to be a parent,
Yeah, what's on your heart and mind for your daughter? What's on your heart and your mind for your daughter, and for the world that you see that she's going to grow up in?
So many things. And I think if you allow yourself to lean too much into, how chaotic it all is, it becomes really overwhelming. So I guess actually the most calming space that I find is as a parent in this time, because this is a life lesson that I really, really learned and integrated in Melbourne during the pandemic. Having a baby at the start of COVID, like nearly her first 18 months of life were all in lockdown. you know, you can only control your response to things at the end of the day. And that's not to say give up and to not wish for better. But I think just like on an energetic level, that kind of creates, you know, it makes me sound like a total yoga teacher, but it creates a vibration that kids pick up on, you know, and it influences their environment and their growth. So that's, I think when I tend to get a bit too frenzied about it all, I just bring myself back to that place of like, you know what, she just wants to play with plastic dinosaurs.
Yep.
And I can do that with her. And yeah, teach her to be kind and to value things and to be mindful. Those are little things that I can do. But I think about this all the time with my work. Like it's, you know, I can't save the world. I can't change the arts ecology in Australia. I can't make there be more money for people. I can't make everyday Australians give more fucks about going to the theatre rather than the footy. Like I can't do those things as one person. So it can be really overwhelming at times. And I think that's where, you know, that kind of collectivist approach, the best thing I think any of us can do actually, now that I say it out loud, in terms of moving forward from this like clusterfuck of life that we've all just walked through together and that we're still in, really the best thing that you can do is just align yourselves with people that give the same fucks about things that you do, you know, and create that community, because it's tough going on your own to have that level of energy for things.
Yep.
Because it's fucking hard out there. Sorry, I feel like we just went really dark.
No, that's man. I can get so dark. I'm glad that we went there. Thank you for that share. In response to the last statement that you made about, you know, getting around a community that you're aligned with, that's a big reason that I started doing this. I was just like so fed up of the things that are going on, and I just didn't see. I don't see any way to even talk about it, about anything, and so. But I do see a possibility in putting my energy into making something, and making something that I think, for whatever reason, it's probably stupid and probably meaningless, but for whatever stupid, meaningless reason, I think it'd be good to create that. And so this podcast is a representation of that, and then like the documenting and hopefully the participation in some element of creating an Eclipse event, even though that doesn't really ever mean anything to me in the past. Somehow the idea of just creating a very inclusive, open, happy event up there that brings people together who are astrologers, astronomers, fucking LSD trippers who just want to take a bunch of drugs, young families, put them all together, but put them together in a really inclusive, safe, friendly, open, beautiful way. Just seems like something worth working on.
Yeah, totally.
Because I can't, in the space where the rules have been set, you can't even you can't do anything without immediately beginning the us versus them, tribalism, this left and right and wrong, all sorts of stuff instantly. And it's like, all right, if I have no space to act there in any kind of a sensible way where I can engage with anyone in any sensible conversation, then maybe I'll just focus my energy into creating something that hopefully is just something that is an expression of things that I'd love to see in the direction I'd like to go in. So it comes out of non-resistance. It comes out of just, all right, work with what is, and then from what is there the material there to create something new? And
definitely. Yeah. And I think that just like, you know, that kind of community building, that's always been the core value of my work, you know.
Yeah.
It's always been there, and I think it will always be there. So that's kind of, I feel, a strength in my work ethic and my capability, but you know, it transcends just work. It goes across all areas of life. Again, we've just moved back here. We've got a young toddler. Like the next step is to to build community with other families. I'm in a
Yeah, for
completely
sure.
different part of my life to what I was when I
absolutely.
lived here before. You know, I
You're
lived
a mum.
I lived here in my
Congratulations,
20s.
Mum. Yeah.
I don't know any mum friends.
Yeah,
That's something, you know, we want.
Calling all mum friends. Yeah. Cool mum friends. Yeah. What kind of mum friends do you want?
I want like ones that swear when the kids aren't there, because that's kind of my vocation.
Yeah, cool. Yep.
No, I think just, you know, open-minded people who like to have a good time and just like not judgmental, because fuck, parents can be really judgmental of each other and it's hectic. Yeah, it's an interesting, like,
That's a trip.
yeah, it's actually a trip without drugs. Like if you want to go on a trip, just have a kid.
Yeah.
You'll do all of your work in the space of like 1 microsecond.
Yeah. What would you like to be able to be doing with your daughter on the weekends in an ideal world in 2 years' time when she's 4? And what would you like to be doing with her? Would you like to be camping with her? Would you like to be going to the beaches? Would you like to be building sandcastles, walking in nature?
Yeah, totally. All of the above. We're going camping tomorrow, so it's going to be our first camping trip with
cool.
a little toddler. So I'm pumped for
Where
that.
are you going?
We're going down to Mugger River.
Beautiful.
So there's a permaculture farm down there where they've got animals and they grow food, which will be nice. But I think I would just like to do, you know, all of the things that I'm already doing, actually. So as you asked me that question, it makes me realize like maybe I'm doing okay, because I'm just like taking her to see music, gardening, growing food, swimming, a lot of play, imaginative play. It's such a nice way to be present. It really is.
Yep.
It's the perfect antidote to rumination.
Yep. Yeah, and that's no good for anything. So yeah. Music. So aside from working in the event space, you're also producing music. We're here at the Hen House Studios, and you said you're coming back here to do some stuff. Who are you coming back here with? What's the stuff?
Yeah, so I am a drummer and a percussionist and a singer-songwriter. Those are all just words, but you have to use words sometimes to describe what it is that you do. And I'm just going to put together my own band playing some of my music that I've written. I guess in like the jazz idiom, if some of your listeners aren't super familiar with it, there's the kind of general status quo is that if you're going to have your own band, you do a project as a leader. So that's sort of the terminology, which means that it's not generally a band where everyone's making equal contribution, although they can be, but the leader really is like kind of in the driver's seat of a project. So they'll normally be like writing the music, then just, you know, booking people who are badass and getting them to rock up and do their thing. So
yeah, cool.
I've booked some badasses and they're going to rock up and do their thing.
Yeah, wicked. And then are you wanting to share your music live as well, or just,
Yeah, we've got a gig at the end of May.
Where?
At the Duke of George, which is
cool.
in East Fremantle.
Yep, wonderful venue.
I haven't played there before, but that's been built since I lived away and is now here.
It's great.
Like I normally had always played at the Ellington, which is in the in town. So I thought, I'll go
have you been to the Jazz Cellar in Mount Hawthorn as well?
I have many years ago, and that place is still kicking.
Oh, I haven't been for quite a few years.
Yeah,
I've been
like it was.
go.
I think I was an actual teenager. Like it was a long time ago.
The place really does kick it. It's great. So, the Duke of George is so special. That part of Freo is doing a really good job.
Yeah, totally.
Duke of George has brought a wonderful venue.
I'm really looking forward to it. Like when I lived in Perth before, you know, my background, I guess tertiary wise, like I mentioned that I went to WAPA, but I studied classical music. So for me, there was like a very self-imposed stigma about being a classical musician versus being able to transcend that label and become a different type of musician, an improvising musician, like a jazz musician. Or
you're allowed.
Totally.
Yeah, you're allowed.
But when you're in it, it feels like that's your pathway, you know, like there's not a lot of flexibility, particularly in the kind of music that I was playing. I was like playing with orchestras and I was very dyed-in-the-wool orchestra player. That was really what I wanted to do, you know, like when I got into playing percussion in the first place as a 12-year-old, my career goal would have been to like play the Star Wars soundtrack with the London Symphony Orchestra. Like that would have been for me the absolute pinnacle, because I loved that kind of large scale grandeur that was really evocative and told a story and was really cinematic. That music was fascinating to me, and it still is. Like, it's absolutely brilliant and amazing. And to take part in that kind of, force of playing with 80 people is so good. Like, I feel so fortunate that that's something that I've experienced in my life. It's probably not something that I'll go back to. And I moved away from it in a very deliberate way because I sort of craved more autonomy and to be able to, play in smaller groups and to be more creative and more flexible with music making and to just make music in a different way. But yeah, when I moved to Melbourne, which was 6 years ago, I had been playing like some drum set, not a lot. A friend of mine and we went to a jam together in Collingwood, and he said to me, "Oh, do you want to get up and have a hit at this jam session?" I was like, "Oh my God, no. No." And then he said, "Go on, do it." And it just occurred to me, I was like, you know what? No one in this town knows me from a bar of soap. Like, I could be a killing drummer. And
Traveler's freedom.
That's the thing. I just decided, I was like, oh, fuck it. I'm just going to start again. And I'm just going to become a drummer. Like, I'm going to say that, I play drums now. That's my thing. Like, and I just kind of started from square one, and it was very liberating.
Yeah.
So I feel excited to come back here now because Perth has an absolutely mind-blowing jazz community and community of improvised music makers, a lot of whom are based through WAPA or through the Conservatorium and kind of come out of that lineage. And I never really interacted with any of those players because of this self-imposed stigma before. So I'm excited to be able to kind of start afresh and meet some people and play with some people in that way.
Cool. Look forward to hearing more of your music out there. Yeah, it'd be great. Wicked. Well, thank you, Holly. That was a really fun conversation.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Any final, any other topic or closing thought you would like to delve into now?
Not really. I think it's great what you're doing with the podcast.
Thank you.
I think Eclipse Festival should most certainly happen.
Yeah.
Or Eclipse event, whatever it is. I'll go up for it.
Yeah.
I will camp alongside the acid trippers with my 2-year-old.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right, stay tuned. There'll be more on that. Thank you so much. This was great.
Yeah, cool. Thanks,
Much love.
Joseph.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Holly Norman. What a cracker. I had such a good time. If you did have a good time, please share this. Share this directly with someone in a private message. Share it on your Facebook wall. If someone came to your mind while you were listening and you were like, well, this could be useful for that person to know about, share the whole thing or share just the minute that was useful for them, right? Maybe next time you're listening, if something comes up that's useful, take a screenshot of that minute so you can share exactly where it is. If you're on YouTube or even on Patreon or anywhere else, I've got timestamps of the sections of the show all on my website, outonfirepodcast.com, to make it easy for you to find the bits that were meaningful for you and share just those bits. Guys, I want to say a lot of thanks to you for coming onto the Facebook page and subscribing on there. It's really useful for me to be able to have you on that page because it makes it affordable for me to be able to send the content directly to you. Coming up content-wise, I'm looking at the CEO of Fringe Festival. That's the largest arts festival in Western Australia, part sponsored by the government and part sponsored by Woodside. I've also got a sculpting organization that is in charge of running multi-million-dollar public sculptural artworks. So if that's something that you're interested in learning more about, that should be a real cracker episode as well. And I am looking at meeting with quite a few other large festival organizers to understand more about the Eclipse event and document that fully as we shared in this episode. That should be really exciting as well. If you want to have any part in that, learning about that, going to that, participating in that, running a business there, market there, whatever level of participation, this podcast I hope to be an invaluable resource for you. And finally, I want to invite you to join me on Patreon. Check us out at Patreon Art on Fire. And that's a place where, if you were to sign up, I'll be writing you a personal email. I'll be saying thanks. I'll be giving you a shout out in these episodes as I did at the start of this episode to say thank you very much. And it's a place where this work can be supported and can continue to be created. I pledge to continually reinvest this into this program, and everything that comes in I want to put back into the program to sustain a lifestyle doing this and to build upon it as well. It's wonderful to have your considerations there, so thank you for checking it out. Art on Fire podcast on Patreon. Thanks so much. Stay tuned for another episode coming up soon. Lots of love. Ciao.